Welcome to the Northern Leaders Podcast, a podcast that shines a light on the people who make the North a great place. And our special guest today is Jen Atkinson, and she most definitely makes the North a better place. She's the founder and executive chair at Travel Scene Limited. Jen is an icon of the world of travel. She made her name at ITC Travel Group, but decided to go again with her next business, which is called Travel Scene, which has already grown to more than £20 million turnover. It's fair to say with Jen that you get what you see. We co-hosted a 5-star rated podcast called The Holiday That Changed My Life podcast and became firm friends after that. She's a single mother of 2 and recently turned the big 50, but you won't believe it when you see her. I'm really looking forward to interviewing Jen, or she'll interview me. But first, a word about our sponsors. This episode of the Northern Leaders Podcast is sponsored by Lockton, the world's largest independent and privately held insurance brokerage. In their latest set of results for the 12 months to the end of April 2025, Lockton reported $4 billion in revenue, marking Lockton's 5th successive year of double-digit organic growth. Lockton's private ownership model means it has more than 13,000 associates doing business in more than 155 countries around the world to focus solely on client risk and in their insurance needs. The company's Manchester office has over 100 staff and is headed up by the inimitable Matt Davis. Welcome back to the Northern Leaders Podcast with our special guest, Jen Atkinson. Jen.
Hello, Chris.
I was going to say welcome, but you beat me to the punch. Not for the first time. I'll let you interview me, actually. Jen, we always start with the same 2 questions on every episode of the podcast. The first one is, what does the North mean to you?
The North is everything to me. I would say it was my value. So I'm a Yorkshire girl from Leeds. So probably grit, determination, possibly a little eye on the pennies, as a tight Yorkshire lass.
Yeah.
And I'm a real proud Northerner.
No, actually, it comes through in your decision making and your business approach as well. This is the Northern Leaders Podcast. We've explained why you love the North for. How do you define leadership?
Leadership for me is about being a visionary, being courageous, and taking risks. So the people that inspire me in leadership in business are those that see the future before the rest of the world see it, or do things differently and have the courage to do it, not just talk about it.
No, absolutely. Before we talk about your entrepreneurial journey, we're going back to your childhood. Your mum is Austrian. Your dad was an academic. They met on holiday. You grew up in a semi-detached house in Leeds. What was your childhood like, Jen?
My childhood was really normal, actually, but very sort of small. You know, I went to the local comprehensive school. We lived in one of those kind of cookie cutter wimpy homes. My dad read a lot of books. It was kind of dull. But my mum is I think when I look at where do I get my courage from? Siggy, not Siggy. Yeah. We might name the next dog after it. Okay. So Siggy was a very spirited, courageous Austrian. And I think if I look back, you never quite know what defined you. But I think my mum's ability and just general courageousness to do things gave me my gumption. Like, for example, she studied later in life, got a first class honours, etc., etc. So yeah, very normal childhood, very lucky childhood, but certainly not privileged.
I get the impression from Ziggy, your mum, and she just sounds like a bit of a free spirit. Would that be fair?
She was definitely a spirit. She's very forceful, very Germanic. She's kind of person that, the English people wait in a queue very politely. My mum would walk to the front and wonder why everybody else was waiting. So she was she took what she wanted from life, and she still does. And she was very much the powerhouse of the family, whereas my dad was more content reading his books and looking for a peaceful life.
Well, they say opposites attract, don't they? And your mum and dad do seem, polar opposites.
They completely were.
Would you walk to the front of the queue?
Not always, maybe sometimes. Now, I normally pay for it these days.
Absolutely. Your brother, Jürgen Meyer, chairman of the Great British Energy, but probably best known as a former chief exec officer of Siemens, often appears on Question Time on the BBC as well. I think you've got one other sibling as well, haven't you?
He's the clever one, yeah.
Well, the other two haven't done too bad at all. What was the young Jürgen like, and what was the young Jen like as well?
Well, it's hard to remember really, because as I have to remind everybody, he is 11 years older than me. And it's the kind of first thing he says. He always says to everybody who's older. And it really depresses me that sometimes people say me and he's 11 years older.
Is he 11 years older?
Oh, yeah. All right,
Okay.
Chris. But I really looked up to my brothers. They moved over from Germany, actually, when they were probably 9.
Because your brother's got a very Germanic name as well, hasn't he?
Jürgen and Dieter, yeah. I mean, you look back, and this is before Jürgen Klopp and Jürgen Klinsmann made it kind of cool to be called Jürgen. It was not cool in a state school in Leeds to be called Jürgen, and all credit to them. They navigated their way through that. And my mum, because people say, why aren't you called Gertrude or something, Brigitte, whatever. And my mum, I think, saw how tough it was for them called Jürgen and said, I'm going to give you a name that's very vanilla. Having said that, my surname, my maiden name, which I don't normally talk about, but I'm telling everybody now, Trotter. That was awful. Can you imagine? Jürgen Meyer Trotter and Jen Trotter. It wasn't great.
Jen Trotter. Right, so you've not reverted back to that.
Funnily enough, not.
No, but you talk about the situation that, Jürgen had and your brother had, and the bullying that they had as well, in the sense that you go one of two ways when that happens, don't you? You either build resilience or it can finish you off, especially when you're a young kid making your way in the world as well. And I get the impression with, one of the reasons, I don't know your other brother, but Jürgen is so successful. Is that one of the reasons? Probably.
I mean, exactly as you say, you learn through your environment and it makes you tough. I mean, I'll be honest with you, my childhood was much, much easier in lots of ways. They came across to the UK speaking German as the first language. They're now both bilingual, whereas I'm terrible. I got a D at A-level German, much to my mum's dismay. And I was like, well, linguistic skills aren't hereditary. And I was generally quite lazy at school in terms of exams.
You talk about that, talk about my own mum and dad, but I didn't learn how to speak German either. But they weren't German.
I know. I mean, it was just one of those things. I think the world's completely changed now, but in the 80s, 90s in schools, it just wasn't cool to have another language. And, I suppose we all sort of get through school by keeping our head down a little bit. And I felt different. So I suppose how I would describe my formative years were certainly not privileged. Very, very feisty mum whose, life story is quite remarkable. Sense of pride around that, and then just a sort of loving environment.
Yeah, you were born in 1975.
Do we have to keep going on about that?
Well, because you posted on LinkedIn, which you're doing really well on, that you've recently celebrated a big milestone birthday. You went to state school, as you mentioned. Would it be fair to say you weren't particularly academic, but you were entrepreneurial at an early age?
I think what I realised, I wasn't academic. I always got these has potential remarks, which I think are so crushing, killed with faint praise. But I think what I learned quite quickly is communication and creativity and thinking were my two strengths. So if there was anything to do with winning an argument or I actually ended up doing communication studies, which was quite new age at the time. So anything around that, I excelled at. My dad being this kind of academic whose idea of heaven for me would have been to be a teacher. Mm. That's what he wanted for me, a nice, public sector job, no criticism, no anything but that. But I was just never going to do that. So he really pushed me to go to Lancaster University because it was safe and quiet and in the Lake District and do a proper, as he would call it, degree, which was law. And I think I lasted about 5 minutes before I went, I can't do this. I mean, I can't be a lawyer. I can't read a document because I've clearly got ADHD. And if people put bits of paper in front of me, I mean, everybody that's ever worked with me knows I need a single piece of paper and somebody needs to sort of distill the points. So I ended up combining marketing and law just because it meant that I could chat.
Every successful entrepreneur who I now speak to would say probably they've got some element of ADHD, but back then, when we were younger, ADHD wasn't a thing.
No.
But they focus on the here and now. It's interesting that you should say that as well. Would you ever go down the route of late stage diagnosis for that?
I've thought about it. I mean, everybody laughs at me and says I'm so obviously ADHD, but I think you've got to just learn to use it as a superpower. We are all something, exactly as you said. We're all messed up. We're all sort of figuring our way through the mess. And I'm keen not to put labels on things. I'm keen just to be open, honest, vulnerable, and try and learn the lessons, as opposed to give myself a label and then what? Am I going to start taking medication? Or, you still got to cope. You still got to get through things.
Yeah, and I don't dismiss anybody who's got ADHD, and I think there's some people really value from that diagnosis and benefit from it, and the treatment as well. I think there's sometimes people are striving to understand certain things, and they're trying to find a diagnosis that brings them some sort of peace. I'm not sure it does. People said to me, "Chris, you've got ADHD. You should get." And I said, "Yeah, well, yeah. So what sort of thing?" My mum just gets on with it.
Yeah.
And I get on with it.
It's a bit coming back to the what's it mean to be Northern? Being Yorkshire, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You sort of, this is all part of the journey. I think I'm way more reflective at 50 than I would have been at 40. At 40, I probably didn't have any awareness. I was just doing things as it came to me. Whereas now I think I take more time to consider my own responses and my own journey, my own learnings through the way. And I think that's just a benefit of age.
No, I agree. It's one of the few benefits of age, to be honest with you.
Oh, I don't know. I feel fabulous at 50. I think particularly being a woman at 50, there's not that many female leaders. There's even less female leaders who are over 50.
Successful female leaders in the public eye.
Exactly that. And it's a real shame, because I think if you look at sort of hormonal energy levels, I'm not sort of looking at you now who looks slightly tired. You've told me you had a late night. But factually, men's energies decrease and women's energies increase, providing, you've got the right hormone balance, etc. And truthfully, honestly, I feel better at 50 than I did at 30.
So a question I was going to ask you later was the importance of you can't be what you can't see, and being authentic and honest, especially as a female in leadership. And you said to me before, and you're happy to talk about the menopause, which is an area that I'm, starting to understand like I never did before as well. How important is it that leaders like yourself, who are in the minority, are open and honest about things like that?
I think it's incredibly important. We've all got stuff. It isn't as it seems on Instagram ever. There's stuff going on. And it's, some people are affected by the menopause hugely. I'm no expert, I'm no campaigner. But I think you've got to realise you go through stages of your life where your energy levels diminish or increase. And for women, that happens around the menopause stage. I think what's amazing about it is once you recognise that, and once you get a grip of that, coming back to my earlier point, women in their 50s can be at the peak of their life, all that wisdom, all that life lessons. But where are those people in the media that are really showing? Perhaps Trini would be a good example of somebody that's just courageously going out and grabbing a third chapter of her life.
Yeah. Well, most people would call her Trini Woodle, but I suppose when you're on such good name terms, you can do that. Your first job was at a marketing agency, but your big break came when you got a job at ITC Travel Group. Now, I want you to tell me a bit about your mentor, Drew Foster. So he was described, when I just doing my research for today's interview, as a pioneer of the luxury travel market. Tragically died in 2009 at the age of 65. Tell us about him, and what did he do for you?
He was just an incredible figure in my life, probably one of 5 or 6 people that have really shaped and changed my life. He was a character. He was a courageous pioneer of the sector. He was charismatic. And the thing I always say he gave me is just belief. And I don't need lots, but what I do need is somebody alongside me to say, you can do it. And that's what the opportunity he gave me at ITC. So the context for this, I was a marketeer. That's what I did my degree in the end, marketing. I started my career in marketing agencies, did a couple of client-side jobs, and then was head of marketing at ITC. But he really believed in me. He used to say, you're one of these people that likes the glamour of the industry but doesn't get swept away with it. You kind of that northern normalness. And it was a pretty glamorous world to live in. And I kept my feet on the floor. And he just, sad set of circumstances how I ended up running the business. But he said, you've got a plan, Jen. Go and do it.
So, that's the remarkable thing. You joined ITC as a marketing manager. You became the CEO when Drew, unfortunately, became very ill as well. when you became the CEO, one of your first things was to sort of, if you like, save the business. It's almost
Yeah.
like a turnaround, wasn't it?
It was. And, it was tough times. I mean, it's hard to remember back then in 2010, but it was the era of GRG and it was
GRG.
the Royal Bank of Scotland, where they tried to sort of take stakes in your business, well publicised of how aggressive they were. I was made CEO. I know it sounds old now because you've got lots of CEOs that are in their 20s, but I was in my early 30s, female, never done it before, high risk. It was incredibly tough. And I think, looking back, I probably never would have taken it on had I have known that naivety carried me, I suppose is what I say. I took it on, not fully understanding quite what I'd taken on, just believing that I could do something with it. And then I realised very quickly I was going to have to look at the cost base. So I had to set on a pretty aggressive redundancy programme. And
You got rid of 40 members of staff, didn't
that's
you?
right, out of about 140, and asked everybody to apply for the job. And I think that was a huge lesson for me in women supporting women, because when I was made CEO, there was a bit of why her?
You had to make some really tough decisions in the early days. I think you had to make 40 people redundant out of a staff of 120. That couldn't have been easy.
Yeah, it was tough. And I think, again, coming back to the courage point, you take on a role. I hadn't fully thought it through. I thought everybody would be elated that I'd taken the role. They weren't. There was a lot of jealousy.
What, because without you, there wasn't an obvious CEO?
Well, I think a lot of people were like, why her? And that has been a learning for me through my career, is it's not, I'm a big passionate believer in women supporting women, but it's not always the way. It's like, why her? What was good about her? Was she having an affair? Whatever. So there was that element.
Was that worse from other women?
Yes,
Was
it
it?
was. And I've seen it firsthand a lot, where jealousy is an issue. And, I think I'd be lying to say I didn't want to be liked. My Achilles heel has always been, I want people to like and love me. I think as I get older, I care less. I want the people who I love to like me, the wider world. Not everybody's going to like you. They're not all your tribe. But I think the coupling becoming CEO quite unexpectedly in some ways, and then having to make redundancies was really, really hard because I became unpopular. And I found that really, really difficult. And I put so much energy into people, sort of, which wasn't necessarily, if I could give my younger self some advice, it would be not everybody is going to like what you do. And you've got to see the sort of the greater picture.
You hear the phrase a lot now, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's got imposter syndrome. I think I'm not sure everybody admits it, especially men. But do you think you've had or have imposter syndrome?
100%, and still do. I think anybody that says they haven't is a sociopath in some ways. I think women find it easier to show vulnerability than men do. But yeah, of course, even now I'm like, I've started, as you mentioned before, to go on LinkedIn and social media in a way that I've never done. And I'm always worried about other people's judgment. But I've got some super good friends who are just like, you've just got to do what's right for you. And the reason I'm starting to do the social media stuff is it's such a great platform to help other people and inspire them about some of the stories that I've been through on my personal journey. And I do believe you can't be what you can't see. So if some of my funny stories help other people, then I'm happy with that. But it isn't about sort of craving narcissistic attention. And I think that's what the fear is, why I didn't do it. I didn't want people to think I was showing off.
And actually, LinkedIn is there's a real fine line between appearing to be showy and, hey, look at me in my big house and I'm super successful, to actually helping other people who are following in your footsteps as well. I agree. You grew the business from making £40 million to £90 million. So I think, and £5 million profit. So I think even those doubters at the time, you would have won them over with the performance by the numbers. You also hosted a BBC show called The Millionaire's Holiday Club as well. Did you sort of fancy yourself as a Judith Chalmers Mark II?
I'll be honest with you, I sort of did. I don't know why. I grew up in an area of Judith Chalmers. I don't even know if she's still alive, but I bloody loved that show. And I just had it in my head that it was just a great way to showcase the incredible stuff that we did in our business. But my God, it was hard. I clearly knew that I wasn't cut out for TV. As my father said, I had the voice for radio, or the face for radio.
Yeah.
But it was brilliant because it was one of those things like, how do you make a TV program to the BBC? And it was transformative.
Why do you think you weren't a natural for TV?
It wasn't that I wasn't a natural. I enjoyed it. I think what I struggled with was a bit of the attention and the effort and cameras following you around. You know, I remember vividly being at like Euston Station and there being a film crew there, and I was like, this is just not natural. And
It's not Northern, is it?
It's not Northern, and this is a little bit before everybody's now on Instagram and all the rest of it, doing this all this time. So it felt very unnatural, and I just didn't. I felt it an imposter, and it's back to that imposter thing. I was like, what have I got to show or to say or to do that's interesting? You know, I don't look glamorous. I don't look like some of these glamorous women in TV. So it sort of, I would say, triggered some of that imposter in me.
You couldn't put a foot wrong. Like I say, you turned ITC around, North Edge invested, and then along came COVID.
Yeah.
And you lost a lot of money that was tied up in the business as well. What was that like for you?
Well, I think it hurts more now than it did at the time, if I'm honest. I always say that, firstly, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You know, if you're going to put yourself out there, you're going to do big deals, you got to expect that things might not go well. So that's the first thing. I was very lucky to have built what I did and exit what I did. So I'm really grateful for that. And the third thing, I was going through such a horrible personal time, really, really difficult divorce, really, really challenging time with the kids on my own, that actually nothing else mattered. So the pain of losing my business sort of fell behind the pain of what was happening in my personal life and my family life.
People say these things happen in threes, and you were in Barbados and you found out that you were getting divorced in a fairly strange sort of way.
Yeah, it was kind of like, I have this phase that the universe whispers and then it roars. And I'd probably seen the signs, but I was so busy, I wasn't listening to what was happening. And then we had this kind of fateful holiday that was supposed to be an amazing holiday. And we got chatting to this couple. And then on the flight home, it was pretty awful holiday for all sorts of reasons. The woman sort of leant over to me. She was on our flight and she handed me a business card, and she was some leading badass divorce lawyer, and she was like, I'm going to give you my details. I think you might be needing these. And it struck me because she could see what I was choosing not to see. And it was awful. And that was, you know, beginning of the pandemic. And then obviously the threes are the divorce, the pandemic, and then losing the business. It was pretty grim.
And the phone stops ringing then.
Yeah.
And you've gone from hero to zero in your personal life and your professional life as well. And that's why I say you've got that bounce back ability. But how did you come back from that?
Well, it was brutal, is the truth. And back to the universe whispers, I always say to people, listen to the signs, because you don't want the car crash. And mine was definitely a car crash. And I mean, there are elements of it that actually, I know this sounds mad, but I wouldn't change. You know, I learned the best lesson in that time, and that was to become a mother and become a parent. And up until that point, I was prioritizing all the wrong things, you know, more, faster, bigger, harder. And actually my own mental health was shot. I was totally burnt out. I completely lost myself. You know, if you talk to any of my friends, they said I had no time for anybody. I was just on adrenaline overdrive. So I was burnt out and I wasn't the best version of myself. So I would say I spent a couple of years healing, learning to be a parent, learning to, this sounds ridiculous, manage my own household, you know, pay the bills, crazy stuff like that. And really, I call it sort of wafting through the fields in my caftan, sort of deciding what next. And I was super lucky that I was able to have that time financially, and the sort of pandemic enforced that time on me. But that I had some really brilliant people around me that were like, don't give it all up and open a tea shop, which was kind of where my head was at.
I look back on that pandemic and it was a horrible time generally. But that first period of the pandemic, when you had the lockdown, the nice weather, and suddenly you almost put on you took yourself out of the rat race and you spent time with your family and this, that, and the other. I look back at that period of my life quite fondly. If you could block out the stuff that was happening around you because it was tragic. But and I think a lot of people have said the same to me. What's your experience of being a woman in business?
Well, what is my experience? I mean, people talk about it's hard to raise investment, and the facts are the facts. There aren't enough women in leadership positions, and that's because it's really, really hard. You've got to make some sacrifices with your family that are really painful. I'm yet to find the magic formula of having it all. I just don't think that's possible. I sacrificed an awful lot of time with my children when they were very, very young, and that's something I regret. But it's something I had to do at the time. So I don't think you can have it all. I think it's hard. I think you have to put yourself out there and expect criticism in a way that most people can't handle. And to be honest with you, I struggled to handle. But I think women, I mean, I know some of the most brilliant women in business, and they have got so much to offer. And I think if we as a country, as a society, could empower more women to be courageous and take the job and ask for what they want, I think that economically would make such a huge difference. And I think it comes down to confidence. It comes down to opportunity. It comes down to conditioning, schools. Everything is just giving women permission to ask for what they want.
No, I agree. I interviewed Sarah Davis recently, the Dragon's Den, and at an event in
Another
Newcastle.
great Northerner.
Absolute fantastic Northerner, absolutely passionate about it. And she said, look, I don't begrudge anybody who's a stay-at-home mum and spends all their time with their kids. In fact, I'm jealous of them. She said, but that was just not me. And I knew that from an early age. And she said, I don't beat myself up about missing the school sports day, much as I'd love to be there. And I do a lot of stuff with the kids. I celebrate the fact that I got home and I was there for their Christmas nativity. She said, and everybody in the room, which was made up of about 90% women, all nodded and applauded her. And I just think, actually, it needs people to say that you can't be everything.
You can't. And, this is the fact. If you think you can go and craft on an evening, when you're reading a board pack or whatever, it's just not going to it's just not going to be the case. But I sat in a room this weekend, actually, and my children were in a business type of environment. And somebody presented about my story, which was slightly embarrassing, but lovely. And to see my kids hear what I had done, particularly my daughter, I just thought was so powerful, and the conversations we have. And what was really interesting is my son was asking what businesses a lot of them had in the business, and he was asking about the women. What business did they run? Because there was no concept for him that it would be the man that was running the business. He just assumed all the women in the room were the business leaders, which I thought was really interesting. And for me, I did take a bit of time out and be a full-time mum, and it was really hard. And I say to every woman, it is literally the hardest job in the world. And I'm a better mum when I'm working because, I can be more patient. The time can be more quality if I'm feeling good and purposeful and happy.
It's interesting, though, that for you or for your kids, you're just their mum. But when they hear that there is another personality to you and something else that sits behind being a mum, that can be quite eye-opening. You decided to go again, so you launched Travel Scene, which uses social media in a big way to win clients as well. So tell us a bit about the business and why did you decide to go again?
Yeah, it's interesting. After I'd wafted around the fields in my caftan, finding the meaning of life, I did think about going plural, as they say, being a non-exec, perhaps an investor. And I was still sort of in my mid-40s, and I thought one of my great friends said to me, but travel, how to make things work in travel. You've got some brilliant ideas. What's stopping you? And what was holding me back, honestly, was fear. And again, it's not dissimilar to the pivotal moment with Drew. The bunch of people were like, we believe in what you're saying. We believe you're good. We believe that you can do this. And just having that belief got me up and going again. Having the people around me believing in me got me motivated to go again. And I'll be lying again to say it was easy. I think people think if you've done it once, it's going to be easier the second time round, but it's not. Starting something from scratch, I have even greater admiration for people that start something from scratch. You know, ITC was an existing business, and I thought that was hard, but there was a platform, there was an infrastructure, there was a team, there was a brand. Travel scene, there was nothing, thin air.
Yeah, I mean, Lorna Davison of Red Wigwam as well. She had a successful business, went again. Jenny Johnson had a successful business, went again. It's interesting how many people, entrepreneurs, but especially women almost, they have a successful business and they go again. I don't think it's exclusive to women, but I find it fascinating to hear your story.
Resilience, Chris, I think is what it is.
But maybe some of that goes back to Ziggy, your mum, and your upbringing as well.
Definitely.
You've grown to 20 million turnover on the back of a couple of acquisitions. What's your vision for the business moving forward?
Well, firstly, I wrote on my LinkedIn post that at the age of 50, I want to do things with people I like, doing things that give me joy. And that is my motto. I know you do something similar. You talk about being kind every day. And I just want to work with people that I like and help them have the amazing experience through work that I've had. So that doesn't sound terribly intellectual, but on a day-to-day basis, I'm like, am I having fun? Am I learning something? Am I helping somebody in the business? Can I see somebody grow? And it's not always been the case, to be super honest about it. So from a personal motivation perspective, that I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this for those reasons. Having said that, I'm hugely competitive. So, you know, I always say I'm a bit like Gary Barlow when he left Take That. It's like, can I have a solo career? You know, everybody knew he was good in Take That, but could he have a solo career? So I want to do something disruptive in travel using AI, social media. It's moving so fast. It's unbelievable. So that's where I get my energy from. And then use that technology, that intellect into the businesses that we invest and we buy, and be a 60, 100 million pound business, 5-6 million pound profit business.
It's a great stat, which is something along the lines of there's only, I don't know, 50, 80, not many female founded businesses that have reached 50 million turnover. I think they're called super scalers as well. And I think, is that where you want to be? And do you see yourself as being a role model for other female founders?
Do I want to be? Well, obviously ITC was a 90 million business, albeit I didn't found it. Yeah, I mean, I think had I have had Jen in my life, I would have avoided some of the pain that I had. And I think, you know, there's a bunch of women I know in the Northwest that really are role models, and we sort of need, and I know a lot of them, and we need to sort of go out there and empower some more brilliant women to do and take the risks that we have.
That brings me on to the last two questions. So we always end Northern Leaders with these same two questions. Are there any Northern leaders that you particularly admire? And I mean, you know, modesty prevents you from naming me. So beyond ourselves, who would be the Northern leaders you most admire, Jen?
Well, I think probably, aside from my own brother, I probably have to say that, don't I?
Do you admire him?
Generally? I do. God, yeah.
If he wasn't your brother, would you admire him?
I mean, you can't but not, in terms of what he's achieved from no privilege and now what he's doing with government. You know, it's not for the faint-hearted. So yes, but I've always loved the values of the Timpson family. And you know, I've been lucky enough to get to know James and his wife, Roisin. And in terms of their values and how he's managed to take what isn't by any measure a sexy business of cobbling shoes, but make such an impact to their colleagues' lives, and then transform into the prison work that he's doing. It's, for me, that's purpose and business wrapped up into one. And I think business is a force for good. It's a force for profit. And by having profit, you can do good things. So probably I would say them.
Yeah, there's somebody you're very close to that I know as well. And we interviewed on our podcast that we did. Yeah, Angela Spindler.
Yeah, so again, I feel like I need to go through a list. It's like the Oscars now. Yeah. But Angela has been a mentor to me and a great, great friend. And, you know, she's one of, I think at the time, she was one of only 5 or 6 female CEOs in the FTSE 250, gone on and built a brilliant portfolio career. And I just, when things went terrible and people stopped phoning me, she kept phoning me. And she didn't do it for personal gain or because she thought she was going to make money out of me, but she just did it because she's great. And again, you know, I think she's a brilliant advocate for women in business.
I was getting a bit of stick a while ago, quite a few years ago now, and it wasn't nice, and it was in the public eye, and it doesn't matter who you are and how thick-skinned you are, all that stuff does hurt because you want to be liked at the end of the day. And it was one person really. And I got home one day and I got a parcel and I opened it up and it was a whiskey tumbler with a cricket ball that had been embedded in the glass. I won't mention the guy's name who sent it to me. He just said, "Chris, you know, just to let you know, we all love you." Aww. Now, clearly not everyone does, but that at that time was something I remember. And I look back and I think, you know what? I was getting a bit of a kick in there. And he said something really nice, and I thought that was really nice.
And I think it's about knowing your tribe. Not everybody's going to love you. Those that do, hold on to them.
No, 100%. Final question we ask is many, many, many years from now, what would you want your epitaph to be, Jen Trotter?
Don't. God, I can't believe I've publicly come out as a trotter.
Jen Atkinson, what would you want your epitaph to be?
I think I would like it to be through my kids, particularly my daughter, but my son too, just to live boldly, live fearlessly. You know, we have fear, but we shouldn't let it hold us back. I say the people that are full of fear and are held back are the ones that you see that look like the life have been sucked out of them at the Trafford Centre. You know, don't live with regret. Live with, I tried. So my epitaph would be to try and humbly, and I do mean that humbly, because I hate show-offs and I hate if I ever perceived as showing off. Humbly give it a go. Give it some bloody welly, Chris.
I agree. No, it's I
almost swore then. That was bloody swearing.
I was just thinking to myself, the furthest you've ever got in an interview without swearing. So your epitaph would be give it some bloody welly.
Absolutely.
Okay, absolutely. I would look forward to that. Okay, Jen, thanks very much for joining us on the Northern Leaders podcast. We're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to give you my thoughts on Jen Atkinson. BusinessCloud provides tech insight with Byte. To get the best business tech news straight into your inbox, just subscribe to our free newsletter. Details on our website. Well, welcome back to the Northern Leaders podcast. We've just interviewed Jen Atkinson, a travel guru, somebody that I've grown very fond of. We hosted a podcast together. She's very authentic. And I also think I see a lot of similarities in myself in the sense that reached the age of 50, me before her. And also she's at a point in her life where it's, you know what, I'm not going to surround myself by people, fun sponges, people who bring me down, bring the mood down. And also she juggles a lot. She's a single mum. You know, she's a business owner. She's having to deal with raising investment and all those things, and having an older parents as well, and the fun that brings as well. But she just has a go. And actually, you never spend any time with Jen Atkinson and don't come out of the room feeling slightly uplifted by the process. And I thought I certainly did speaking to Jen there as well. And I think she talks about imposter syndrome. I think she's a breath of fresh air and an inspiration to so many people as well. And her black book is to die for. Can I just say that? I would love to get into that black book one day and to start to network with all her people. There's not many people I know who've got a bad word to say about Jen Atkinson. So yes, hugely grateful that she joined us for this episode of the Northern Leaders podcast. That's all for this episode, actually. We'd like to conclude by mentioning our podcast and thanking them, Lockton, the world's largest independent and privately held insurance brokerage. Thank you for them. Thank you for Matt Davis for sponsoring us. And thank you to What Media, who has ever turned our ramblings into this podcast. Please give the Northern Leaders podcast a 5-star review. It helps us move up the rankings, and tell your friends. That's all from me, Chris Maguire.